Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, and there's Amanda. Good. I know she was trying to get on earlier. So we have the official members here, which are Joe, Juno, and Kiva. Well, official from last year, and we're gonna pick, council's gonna pick committee members next week. Yes, next week. I don't even know what day it is. Hi, you all are here for the Equity Committee meeting, first meeting of 2023. Woo woo. We have a work plan. We have some specific things we're gonna do. We know what we want to get to, so we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted to just see, have people introduce themselves in the chat. And then I'm actually going to share. Okay, hold on. I have too many things open, so give me a minute. We don't need that. We need this. Okay. I'm going to share the, I don't know if this is going to come through correctly. This is not actually what I want to show you. I really want to show you the agenda for today because it's switched a little bit from what was posted. Not big. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So today, what we are going to do, can folks see that? Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to do welcome and roll call, which we kind of already did. We're going to review the minutes from the last meeting. We're going to review the work plan that we have set for this year that y'all helped form. We are going to do a dive into all the different kinds of materials that already exist. And I'll just flag, we're not going to go into like nitty gritty detail, but we're just going to like show you guys the panoply of what exists. Then we're going to talk about some of the key target populations that we might want to focus on as we think about developing materials. We're then going to do a deep dive into, there was like a an Excel document that got sent out to you all that we're going to tighten up that has information on what we're calling information channels and amplifiers. Basically, like once we make all our pretty documents and have these informational tools, how are we going to spread them out? Then we're going to talk about some key questions that we're going to want to ask for people with lived experience and what we're calling amplifiers around like how to improve or develop new tools to get information out about how to access services and what happens. Then we'll discuss forming some specific work groups to do work between these meetings on some of these pieces, and then we'll talk about next steps. Any questions about the agenda for today? And we're going to do this all in 2 hours. That's the plan. Okay, let me pull up the minutes. Let's see. I don't know if it's gonna work. Hold on. Sorry. Fred Furters. Hold on. Now I've lost the minutes from last month. There we go. Okay. Apologies, y'all. I'm just going to share my whole screen. We're just going to do it that way. So we have the minutes from last time. This is where we talked about the COC complaint process. You all provided some input on that. And then we reviewed SMARTY goals. We continued working on our draft plan and set the date for this very meeting that we're in right now. So just wanted to see if there's any, I don't know if folks had time to review them, but just wanted to, thanks, Amanda. Jamie, do you know if we need to do a formal votes of approval for minutes for committees?
I think we should continue doing so because that's what most committees do.
Yeah. And so right now we're in this weird spot where we don't have official committee members this year, but I think Joe, Juno, and Kiva, I think the motion is, do you approve the minutes from the December meeting? And I'll go through Kiva.
I make it a motion that we do approve it.
Okay,
yes.
Thank
and
you.
I vote aye.
Okay, Joe.
Yeah, aye.
Okay, and Juno.
Aye for me as well.
Great. Okay, sorry for the formality. Got to do it. So the next piece, let me close those. I want to review the work plan from last that we worked on last time, because a part of what I've done have like tightened up what things need to happen in probably the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter. So just to recap, this is our big overarching goal for the whole year. Basically create information, outreach, and educational materials to engage underserved or unreached communities that are experiencing at risk of homelessness, so that we create some equity around who's got access to resources, because if you don't know how to get help, you can't get help. So what we said for quarter one, and this is what we're in right now, is planning. So we decided we need to look at all the tools we have already, figure out who we want to focus on for these messages, and then figure out what are the channels we already have, what are the tools, pathways, people we already have to get information out. So I tightened this up a little bit just so that and took some guesses about like timing of what we would need to do. So this is basically what we're going to do today. So we talked about this: identifying key target populations, reviewing materials. I actually have more to add in here. Reviewing the channels, creating work groups, list of amplifiers, and some of this way to measure effectiveness, I think we'll start building in as we go. What we don't have quite mapped out yet is exactly what's going to be in February and March, but I think that will emerge from today. And that work plan is in the packet that got posted if you feel like you need to be able to see that. And I will try and post that. Jamie, if you have a chance to post the link to the materials, that would be great.
Will do.
Okay, lots of talking from me. Do folks feel like they know why they're here and what we're going to try and do today? Are there any big questions about that? I see a thumbs up from Joe. Okay, we're going to get into the fun stuff. So I want to start by reviewing just really kind of briefly all the different kinds of materials that already exist, so you guys see what the library or the landscape looks like right now. So the first thing I'm going to start with is our flyer. You know what I'm actually going to do is just open up the folder so it's easier that way. Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to do it this way. Apologies, y'all. It's been a little wild over here. Okay, let's see if I can do it this way with the folder. So this flyer was, Juno's back. So this flyer was developed last year in collaboration with our communications team at Health Services. We got some community input. So there's an English, I'm gonna make this bigger if I can. Let's see if I can make it bigger. So this is on our website. So it's basically has call, care, and core, the 3 access points, how you connect in, what the hours are. And then we also have this in Spanish. So this is our flyer. I'm just going to check. And Jamie, I'm hoping you can check chat because I can't see it while I'm doing this.
Yep, I'll keep an eye out.
Okay, great. I don't have a picture of them. I tried to pull up the, oh wait, maybe I do have. We have a wallet card that our core outreach teams use, and I don't think I have a copy of the template, but it's, I'll see if I can get that to you guys, but it's basically like a wallet card that has the care center locations and reminds people to call 211 to connect to core. Then one thing that I've been working on, and this is not a public thing yet, and maybe it will be, depending on what this committee decides. This is a grid. This doesn't exist publicly, really, because what we normally do is we say like call 211 or reach out to core. Let me just see if I can make this smaller so that you can actually see. So this has every shelter in our community. where it's located in the county, what agency runs it, what population it serves, how you connect, like, can you just call them yourself, or do you have to go through CORE, and then how to connect to them? So this is something to think about for how people might learn about services. Okay, so I want to pause there. Those are like the tools we have sort of for like how to connect to services. We have a few things on our, actually, let me show you our website too. So if you go to the H3 website, on the front, this here says get help. So if somebody's seeking homeless services, this right now is how they would queue to that. I'll say there's a big reorganization happening of the whole county website, but this is what it's like right now, and will probably be like for the next year or two, just in terms of general format. If you click get help, it takes you to this page, which has that call, care, and CORE. And then there's a little link for the English flyer if you wanted to print it out or send it out, or the Spanish flyer. So those are the basic tools that exist right now for community members that want to know how to connect to services.
Do we have a link on our website, on the H3 website, that takes you to CORE, that takes you to 211 website? Is there a link between the two there at all?
There is not. Basically, so let me, on the flyer, it says, on the flyer, it says, it does have a link on the flyer to their website. And on our page when it says 211. So let me give this in case in case people want this. This is the link to our Get Help page. So you can check it out for yourself and kind of see what it looks like.
You did say that there is a link to 211 on that page. Like you can click on the link and it will take you to their resource.
So,
okay, yeah.
Yep, under call,
Yeah.
the third bullet, we did add that. And the other thing I'll add that we just learned is that they do also have a QR code that we could add to the flyer if we wanted to. So that's a tool if somebody has this cell phone.
That's awesome.
Basically take a picture, like it'll link directly to it. Yeah, Teresa, go ahead.
This may be a really dumb question, I don't know, but how do people that are homeless or want to get to that page, how do they get there? I mean, it's like they probably have no idea that these services are available, and they probably also have no idea who to go to get help. And so anyway,
I'm so glad. Okay, so Teresa, this is like a genius question, because this is the crux of the problem. There are lots of people in our community that don't know about this stuff. What are the ways that this is the heart of things, is like, how do we make sure that this message is getting out to people? Personally, like on our website, it's not super clear. There's no like big banner that says like, do you need help? Click here. It's like one of a bunch of options. You have to click a couple layers to get into that flyer. People may not know the flyer exists. They're maybe not printed out at all the agencies that maybe are serving people that aren't homeless, right? So like our benefits offices or other places where people experiencing homelessness might be that need to know this. So when we get to that like amplifiers grid, that's where we want to talk about where this stuff should be. But there is this whole other thing about like, how do we improve what's happening on our website?
And I think on the other end of it too, folks hear a lot through word of mouth, right? People are savvy and resilient, and they connect to resources and share the information. And so one of the challenges that we also need to kind of navigate is making sure that they're getting up-to-date, consistent, correct information. Because when you're hearing it from a friend, and that friend's experience might have happened 3 months ago, a year ago, whatnot, things might have changed. And so always trying to make sure that we're getting correct information out there.
And Jamie, I'm so glad you said that, because for those of you that have been around this county for a while, part of why we moved to having 211 be one of our access points, and part of the reason why we don't have like resource lists of like all the 43,000 agencies that programs and all that stuff, is because it was really, really hard to keep things up to date. So that's why 211 has paid staff whose whole job it is to keep their databases up to date. And so instead of everybody having their own resource list, we basically are driving everyone to 211 where they have their magic database that has all this information. We have our core mobile outreach teams that you can connect through 211. And then we have our brick and mortar care centers, right? Trinity Center and GRIP, where people can come inside. And the flyer says when, where, what you get. Yes, so like until we make things new and sparkly and shiny, we are happy to help you spread the tools that we already have.
And so,
yeah,
in the chat, they was just suggested to, because I think that it's one thing to email the flyer to folks, but I think H3 can actually take it upon themselves to print it and mail it to folks, print it and do it handouts at like food distribution places, and not relying on the organization to print it out themselves. Like, because it's just going to be stuck in an email. They overlook it. They don't print it themselves, or they don't print enough, or whatever that may look like. But I think that if H3 prints it and sends out, say every month, send out a new copy for whatever that might look like. But I think that just be beneficial.
Yep. So Joe, this is exactly the kind of thinking that we want to capture. Like there's kind of these two pieces. There's like, what are the tools we need to make? And then how do we need to get them out? So this is something that we can, I'm just going to jot down as an idea of like, when we identify all these channels and amplifiers, like maybe mailing them out hard copies, or having like regular reminder emails or something like that to the partners. Yep.
And the hard copies, I think, are a really great idea, because emailing them, emailing our amplifiers and our distributors is great. But when we send them a hard copy, we're not putting it on them to produce paper, to produce the ink. We're putting it on us. And so, because we don't know at any point when any amplifier may be in need of those types of services themselves. So in order to avert that and bypass that, just send out hard copies so that they have the resources to give to their clients.
Great. Okay, capturing that. So then there's this like next, I'm happy to hang out here for a little bit. So handing them out is a great idea. It's where we will learn about these programs. A lot of homeless folks don't get on computers. Exactly. So that's also why we have like the business cards that just have like the care center hours and programs and locations, and reminder for folks to call 211, because also like flyers might get totally destroyed when they're, in a backpack or getting wet or whatever. So that chunk of information was like those 3 basic access points. How do you even begin? Then there's kind of this like next set of information, and we get a lot of questions about like, okay, so I reach out to those 3 things, like then what happens? There's a lot of confusion, myths, concern about like, well, what can people expect to happen after that? So I want to show you a few more things that have been developed and not necessarily like widely distributed. And actually what I'm going to show you is a bit out of date, partly because we like made it and then never really used it. But it is showing the coordinated entry process. So I'm going to share this with you. Oh, crud. Hold on one second. Like you're going to see inside my brain. Just keep going. Okay, so this document, what we tried to do when we very first were building coordinated entry was to show people like, okay, from these 3 access points on the left, right? You have 211 from a care center or core outreach. What happens? So the first step is like, there's this initial intake or screening.
Jamie, if you're looking at the document, we're not. We're still seeing the file.
Oh, no. Okay, hold on. Thank you for telling me that. There we go. Let's try this. Is that showing?
Yep.
Okay, great. So if we start from left to right, we have those 3 access points showing like, so once you hit one of those, there's some sort of like screening or intake or something that happens. And from there, you might be connected to a bunch of different things. And some of this, we've changed a little bit how we're describing things. But the idea is showing like, okay, you hit this point and then something happens, and then where might you get connected? So maybe somebody, rapid resolution is not really the language we're using anymore, but like maybe you get diverted to prevention or diversion, and so you don't experience literal homelessness. But maybe you get connected to a care center or an emergency shelter or a warming center. From those points, you would have our housing needs assessment, right? So when we talk about the VI SPDAT, that's what we mean. It's like, these folks want to get into housing. This tool happens. Then you go into the community queue, which is sort of like almost like a waiting list. If there are openings, then there's like a housing placement case conference. From there, you might get connected to these other things. And from there, you might get connected to housing.
I have a question for you.
Please.
I probably should know the answer to this question. You've probably answered it before, but please
It's all
forgive
good.
me.
Go ahead.
The core outreach team, how often do they go out? Where do they go? Is there a schedule? And the reason why I'm asking is because one of the reasons why we have this committee is because of the equitable outreach. And so I don't know if it's clear in my head
Mm-hmm.
how often they go out, if they have a schedule.
That's a really, really good question. And the short answer is it depends on the team. The bigger answer is we have approximately 14 teams that are spread throughout the whole county. Some cities have their own contracted teams and they set their own hours with them. But generally, we have coverage during the day and then coverage during the night up to like from 4 to midnight. And basically core, and Jamie, if I'm getting this wrong, let me know, because it's been changing. But essentially we don't have, what I can tell you is we do not have core 24/7. It ends at a certain point at night.
Okay.
And part of that is because we don't have places for people to go at 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't have a lot of shelter capacity. The warming centers kind of stop taking people at a certain time of night. So way back in the day, we used to have like an independent outreach program, and they were out in encampments at like 2 and 3 in the morning. But like, there's not actually that much they can do at 2 or 3 in the morning. So given the like limited resource we have, the decision was made to have core have certain hours. That was a much longer answer to your question, but I think you're asking a good thing, which is like, people should know if they call at 2 in the morning, they're not going to get a live person and have core respond. Is that what I'm hearing? Sort of the sub.
Yeah, that's part of it. My thought was, okay, do we have, for instance, Antioch, I live in Antioch. I know that Antioch is sort of tweaking things a little bit or doing the processes a little differently. But my thought is between 9 and 3, do we have a team every day? Do we have teams going out into different areas, talking to these people, getting them to understand what the resources are, getting them to sign up if they're ready? And I'm talking daily, and I'm not even talking about 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm talking about like office hours, 9 to 2, 9 to 3. Do we have people on a regular basis going out daily, different teams,
Yes.
That's what, okay, all right.
And what you're flagging for me, Joe, I see your hand. We're going to talk in a minute. I actually have also drafted some frequently asked questions documents that are maybe for somebody like you that's like, I'm not seeking homeless services right now, but I kind of want to know bigger picture what's going on in the system. So we may be able to make some tools that have some of that information that's not necessarily like all crammed on a flyer. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to comment on the 2-on-1 thing that just a suggestion that we take some 211 trainings, that we actually take it upon ourselves to learn about 211 and how it actually functions, both in the homeless sector as well as the mental health sector. Because those questions that Kiva asked are, they are covered in those tutorials when it comes to 211. That's not our responsibility as H3. It's not, I mean, like, okay, we can hold people accountable for the things that they do, but it's not our responsibility to make sure that the core is going out there and doing their job. And then the other thing too, I understand where you're coming from, and
No,
we're not
I just
trying
was
to
asking
debate.
about what I know about 211. I just was asking it exactly what the
It wasn't personal. Can I continue what I was going to say, please?
Yes.
And around Antioch, the core team, never mind. I forgot what I was going to say, so never mind.
So one of the things I'm hearing too is like making sure that we're helping people set realistic expectations of what's happening where. So Kiva, that's what I was hearing. It's like you wanting to understand, like, what is core doing? I don't know. How many are there? When are they working? Got that. Joe, I think that's a terrific idea, especially for committee members to go through a 211 training so that you guys have a really deep understanding as you're doing this work. I saw Rachel, you had your hand up.
I did. Sorry, I did. And then I put it down because I just put it in the chat because I know there's background noise with my daughter. So, but yeah, I put it in the chat about having somebody come.
Oh, great.
That's definitely something we can reach out to 211 about. They can join a future meeting.
Absolutely. And I think as you said, Joe, there are trainings, actually, there are like 1-hour trainings that they offer for anybody who wants to understand their databases, but we could also have them come and do a quick thing of like I still even don't 100% know, like if you call, what happens? If you call seeking services, what's the tool they use? What are the questions they ask? What can you expect? And this, I think, actually may go into when we start talking about potential videos, like maybe we have a mock call where you see what kind of questions are going to be asked. Okay, so I showed you the coordinated entry graphic, which I think has lots of opportunity for improvement. But part of what that was trying to accomplish is answering some of the questions of like the machinery. And maybe that's part of like an FAQ, right? Like what happens when somebody calls? We could sort of talk about, so Amanda, this is really helpful. When you call core, you get an answering machine. So there's something about the messaging about making sure people know that you won't always get a live person. So when calling caller, you may have to leave a message. What's a realistic expectation? How long will it be until you get a call back? It could be 3 business
24
days.
hours.
Right.
Core isn't 24 hours.
Yep.
Core is on a certain schedule. You can't call core at 2 o'clock in the morning. You have to know that schedule. You can call 211 at any time to get resources, but somebody from core isn't going to come out to you at a specific, like that's not what they do. So.
And Amanda, I hear you. You want to get a call back the first time. Yes. And so this is also like, we're gathering some feedback. I think as we do, when we get into the like information gathering, I think part of what we might want to do is also get information about like, what are people's experiences on the ground? I think there's going to be a way we can sort of get some like system improvement info as we're gathering information about what kind of intel about what information people want. Yeah. Yep. So, and this again, I think a lot of what we're trying to do is help people set realistic expectations so they don't get frustrated and just give up on the whole thing.
But so, and here's the thing, right? Like this isn't H3's responsibility, that's core's responsibility.
Well,
like, I mean, so we have to hold them accountable, yes. But didn't you say that the reason why we're using 211 is because we're networking with them, we're not controlling them? That's their,
we contract with them.
Right. So that means that we have to hold them accountable. But they're the ones that have to fix the way in which they reach out to people who are homeless. They're the ones but we have to hold them accountable, saying, hey, this is what we're getting from our folks. You need to fix this, or you need to look into this into your system, right? Like we can't fix core's process. That's not where we come in, right? Like,
I think there's a few layers to this, because absolutely, and that's kind of what our whole program models and performance standards are about, is making sure that they're clear, transparent performance standards for our contracted providers. And on the other hand, our community doesn't receive the resources we need to appropriately scale our responses. 211 is primarily volunteer run. CORE, they're not making the wages we want to be paying them. And so we know that there are a lot of factors that go into this. And so I think what would be a goal of mine with the council, with this group, with lots of folks, is trying to figure out what are the ways that we can be making improvements and addressing these kind of structural issues, and how do we keep advocating for improving, because to expect kind of the highest top tier luxury Cadillac service from 211 when it's all volunteers, that's asking them to probably do the impossible.
well, and I'm concerned. I'm really concerned that if we start throwing out these flyers and putting them out more and more and more, and more people start calling 211, and they're going to get way more backlogged, and then the system's going to be even worse. So like, where does that catch all? Like, I have called 211 multiple times and gotten nowhere.
Yep.
I have talked to multiple CORE people. I have had multiple like VI SPDAT interviews, whatever, and still have gotten nowhere.
Yep.
So I mean, it's just kind of like, why would we push all that material if CORE is actually not able to do the job? Not saying that they can't do the job, but it's just because they're volunteer and because the system's flawed, all of those other reasons.
Yep. These are all kind of parallel processes, and that's one of the downfalls to me about the coordinated entry process flow document, is that on paper, on that one pager, it looks so simple. You call 211, you get a service, you get an assessment, you get housing. But what that doesn't really convey is the scale and the time that a lot of those things tend to take, right? You can't necessarily serve 2,000 plus people a day or a year or however many we're talking about when you don't have enough housing out there or enough resources out there to support that number of people. So that's one of the challenges that this group is navigating, and how we're developing communication resources that give people the information that they need and set expectations clearly and help us generate ideas on how to move us towards that more perfect world we're looking for.
I really appreciate that clarification, Jamie, because it does, that's important.
Yep. And Joe, part of why you may be confused is in the years past, we used to be like, hey, such and such agency provides such and such a program. And so people would be like, call Shelter Inc., call this, call that. And since we've moved to coordinated entry, where there's these 3 access points, the idea is like, it shouldn't actually matter who's providing the service, because everybody should be having equal access to whatever's available appropriate for them. But for our purposes today, hopefully that helps clarify a little bit.
And so this is, I've been working with health leads for a while now. And so health leads and I don't know how many times I've tried to like pitch these networks to connect, because they're doing the a cohort with 211, which is all like Bay Area ran. It's like all of California. And that cohort, we're discussing on how to make this process better. And so like wherever this is starting, like again, with the whole trains coming all in at once, right? Like these are things that are starting to blend even more than before. So
Joe, can you clarify when you say make this process better? Is it like anybody seeking any kind of service when they call 211, or specifically for people experiencing homelessness?
Both and.
Okay.
So right now, the larger conversation is about how to make the 211 services better, but then there's the like the other conversation of the unhoused population and how they utilize 211 and CORE and all of that stuff. So yeah, both and.
Got it. And the other thing I'll say, and Jamie Schechter mentioned this a little bit. So one of the, there's like the making sure that everybody knows what those access points are. And I think our role as this committee is to figure out How do we start at the very, very front, making sure that everyone and their mother knows if they know somebody that's experiencing homelessness, they know where that flyer is, they know where the care centers are, they know how to get people the information about call 211, go to a care center, call CORE. I'm also hearing this subtext of, not subtext, but like this other thread of like, so part of what happens is we don't have enough capacity in our system. So people do that, they follow that. So Joe, what I heard you say was like, I'm a little nervous about like leveling that playing field, because then what happens is people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, but they're not getting their needs met. And that is, or potentially not getting their needs met if there's not enough capacity. Part of why I think it's important that we, like one of the things that we will get out of doing this, if we do this right and create more demand, is hopefully we can make sure people have some realistic expectations, but then we also will have data about unmet needs. So we will have data on how many people are calling 211. We will have data on how many people are calling CORE. We will have data on how many people are going to the care centers. And then we can advocate and say, hey, funders, look, we have very clear data. We're doing our part. We need help building even more because this is what the need looks like. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Jamie, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add about that. Okay. So to go back to the tools, so I also, there's a couple of frequently asked questions documents that I've drafted that I think were in the packet, and if not, they'll be in the packet afterwards. But one is about unsheltered homelessness specifically. One is about sort of homelessness more broadly, a little bit more about the system of care. I'm not going to show it, but like when the work group gets to those looking at things, that's something you can look at. We also have, so then if we start to move into the sort of like amplifiers or people that work in the system that want to understand better, there's a COC 101 video that my colleague Cassie made a couple years ago, and I think there's a link. Let's see, did I put it in here? I might have. Sorry, hold on. I'm trying to remember if I put a page in there from that. Oh, I think it's here. Okay, hold on. Yeah, so from our website, and actually I'll just pull up the website and do it that way. Sorry, I'm a little clunky today, you guys. There's a lot of different pieces. So I'm going to share my screen. So we have the COC 101 video that is about 10 minutes long, and it's a Prezi, which is like almost like a PowerPoint. So this was very technical, and it really explains the nuts and bolts of how the system works. And so I'll put the link in the chat if anybody wants to nerd on this later. Come on. Okay. Then there is also, okay, so gosh, I don't even remember how many years ago, we actually started scripting a video and even started working with our communications team to, I'm gonna stop share and reshare so we can see this. So we did like it's kind of what we've been discussing where instead of animation, we might actually have real people, but it's essentially having people walk through what might be your experience connecting to any of these services. So I don't know if I can pull that up easily, but the work group will get a chance to look at that. And then the last one that we have is a PowerPoint. And I think I included it in the packet. So it's basically the slide deck that I use when I'm talking to community partners or other agencies where they want to understand our homeless system of care. So those are like I don't know, there's 10 different tools that we have currently, depending on who the audiences are. I'll pause there. I know that was like a ridiculous amount of information. questions, thoughts, comments? We're going to get to who wants to work on which thing in a little while. I mean, I'm very.
I
Go
put
ahead.
something in the chat around safety, and I don't know if this might be a good time to kind of bring it up, because
Say more.
it's kind of that in between stage. It's the feeling like, so having material, say the flyers, right? Like the flyer being shared with folks who may not trust the system, that may have tried going through the system and says, you know what, well, it's flawed and, you know, it doesn't work for me, whatever excuse, whatever reasons they may have. Is it going to be within our material? Will it be in video? I don't know what it looks like, but there has to be some sort of message around, you are safe using our resources. Coming this direction, coming through our system, there is a level of, I don't know, we want to use the word terminology, lived experience, who has touched upon the way that this process works. So it's more compassionate. It's more like that process needs to somehow get to the people, to build that trust and to like really educate them on the fact that a lot of us put a lot of thought and heart into this process, and that they can trust it and it is safe to use. That, okay, we may, you know, fall through the cracks. It's hard work, but it's work that's worth doing. Like that message somewhere needs to be intertwined somewhere.
Joe, can you say more when you talk about it being safe to use? What are the safety concerns that come up, do you think?
Of course, the conversation we always have about, you know, people calling and then the first person who answers the phone is a complete ass, right? Like they're not nice, they're rude, they don't help, and it makes the situation worse. Or people that don't have the training of trauma-informed training on how to actually speak to somebody who's in crisis, those things. And then there's also the other portion of the social workers and the system workers who are overworked and they, you know, forget to check in on somebody, and then that somebody is in crisis. Like all of those reasons is what I mean by that.
Okay. So I feel like I'm hearing you talk sort of about like integrity of the, that's helpful, because I wasn't sure if, when you were saying safety, if you meant like, are they going to get reported to authorities for something?
Well, that too. Yeah, that could be part of it too, right? Because a lot of people who are immigrants or not from here, like they're scared to use the system because they think that ISIS is going to show up or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so yes, those are legit things that we need to tell people that it is going to be safe. Like, please.
This is something we also come across with families who are experiencing homelessness. They fear that engagement with Child and Family Services mean, you know, all the things that can mean if they are sharing their need for housing supports and resources. So definitely, when we get to the amplifiers and networks, wanting to build those relationships with folks who already have those connections, who people already feel a little less fearful of approaching, so that we're not the ones giving the message of, hey, just trust us, but that they can say, okay, well, so-and-so over there says that this can be safe for me, so.
And I'm assuming that the core team is addressing those. When the core team is going out, they're addressing those types of issues that the unhoused have, that they're letting them know that this is a compassionate process, and that at the same time you have to be patient, because either we're low staff, we're scantily staffed, or we've got a lot of cases or a lot of people coming in, or so we can address that safety need and that fear of using the system, fear of using the system, or fear of using the process on a personal level. And as each one of the persons that we're serving goes through the process and they learn that it's not so scary and that it is compassionate, then that gives us another spoke in the will, saying that, yeah, this is a good process. And that's going to take some time, I know.
Yeah, absolutely, Kiva. One of the biggest successes of CORE is that they take that time to relationship build when things are successful and all of that. I know that no such thing as perfect outreach right now, but CORE a lot of times what they're doing is handing out a pair of socks or food or a hygiene kit and building that relationship. It might take 1, 5, 10 contacts before that person's willing to say, okay, I trust you enough to give you a little bit more information about me and start having that conversation about resources.
Great. That's all I have to say right now about the kinds of materials that already exist. There will be a deeper dive outside of this meeting for people interested in it, but wanted you guys to kind of have a sense of what we might be talking about. Any other questions, thoughts, sort of big picture related to the materials? Okay.
You did mention that there was a commercial, a video of some kind. Was there a PSA
It
kind
didn't
of
get
like
launched. We honestly, what happened is we kept building it and our system kept changing and we had to keep going back and editing it and like delaying the launch. And then COVID hit.
Oh, okay.
So we have some bones that we could use as sort of like a script or how to think about it, but there's nothing that's gone public that's oriented for people seeking services.
And the reason I was asking is because I've been on my vacation, just kind of being a lump on the couch. I've been watching a lot of TV, and those really horribly emotional videos of the dogs out in the I get so angry. I get so angry at those videos because I'm like, screw your dogs. What about the people? Like, I don't understand why we don't make a video just like they do with those dogs, but have it with people and literally have a video of walking through the camps. But like, they do it for the people in Ukraine right now. Like, I'm seeing videos, like, I don't understand why we haven't gotten there yet. Is it, I don't know, but I think that it needs to happen because people need to see the humanity behind it.
Got it. Oh, Rachel, I realized what your question was asking. Yes. Agreed, Joe. So we can, when we get to the video development, definitely want to get your brain in there. Okay, I think we'll pivot to Jamie. This is where we're going to talk a little bit about like key populations, and I'm going to put them in the chat so we don't have to like share screen.
So I'm sure a lot of you know that I hate having to reinvent the wheel unnecessarily. And when we were talking about key populations, we're not unique in doing this work, right? A lot of our funders, a lot of our partners, a lot of research is out there about who's underserved. And so I didn't want to like say, okay, let's have a brainstorm about who we're missing, because we know a lot of that information already, right? And so we pulled out from the C4 Innovations Equity Report that we've discussed and kind of was the genesis of this group, some of the key populations that they identified, and that's Native Indigenous folks and Hispanic Latino EX folks as disproportionately impacted in our community. We also pulled out, for those of you who regularly attend the council meetings, from our Homeless Housing Assistance Program Action Plan, or our HAP Action Plan. We presented that back in June. We had to submit a somewhat updated one, I believe in November. And that's a requirement of state funding that we receive, where we have to set subpopulation goals for each of the kind of big picture goals that we're working towards through the funding we get through that stream. And so there we've pulled out folks like transition-aged youth, people living with disabilities, Black African American households, LGBTQIA+ households, and really want to put that in front of you all to see if those are the kinds of groups that are resonating, if there are people you think we're missing, just to kind of remind y'all where we've been, what we've identified, and as we're discussing, the networks and amplifiers, how are we meeting the needs of these groups that we've already identified in other places?
Jamie, I'd like to say that I'm really excited you have Taze on there because with the Collaborative Advocacy Power Partnership, I lead the economic equity team. And one of the things that we are addressing is resources and including homelessness for the transitioning age youth. And so I'm really excited to see that that's a part of the core goals, one of the core goals that we are experiencing, because that is a really important, the word transitioning is just, it tells it all, because we're taking them from youth to adulthood, and they're without housing, and that sets them up for a life. It could possibly set them up for a lifetime of the same type of habits and the same type of living situation. So I think it's extraordinarily important, and it's extraordinarily awesome that we're not just including that, but we're pulling that part out. So thank you so much for that, really.
Of course. And we know that we undercount them and they don't necessarily show up in our system in the way that adults or families do. So that's one of our goals for sure, is to make sure we're doing a better job of reaching young folks.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand that in the Taze, we do have disproportionately more Black, African American, more Hispanic.
Yep.
And so when we're addressing the transitioning age youth, we are also addressing those other areas as well. So that's exciting.
Absolutely. Rachel, I see your hand up.
Thanks. So I do have one other population, and that would be system involved or justice involved, especially because due to the resentencing laws going on, the reform 3 strikes, there's actually a lot of decarceration happening, and it is incredibly difficult to find resources, housing especially, for that population. So I would love to see that also be added as a key population target.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Rachel, for calling that out. I agree. Folks with the criminal legal system involvement face huge barriers in our system. And we do have some programs that are specific and lots of work going on in the background. So that would be a great group to call out.
And so would the next conversation be where to find these populations, as to like, I see a lot of identifying factors, right? But like when we are talking about sharing the material, it's not like we're going to go ask somebody, are you one of these identifying factors? Like, we got to figure out now where they are so we can provide those materials, right? It's like, so where does, I don't know. Where does that start?
This conversation is going to feed into our amplifiers conversation. And so when we're prioritizing how we're connecting with more people, we've got a pretty long list. So chances are we're not going to do 200 more new outreach presentations immediately, but we can prioritize and say, are we getting a decent spread, or are we focusing on just kind of one group getting all of our attention? And if we are, is that what we want to be doing, or are we doing that unintentionally? So it's really meant to kind of seed that conversation. And I'll point out, I'll also step back and thank you, Kiva, for talking about the intersection of young people and other identities. That is something that I think about a ton, because nobody is just one thing. So many folks, the more kind of areas that you identify with, the different challenges you're facing, the way that, it's not one size fits all. It really is something that I think about a lot. And on the other hand, by focusing on certain groups, it ends up raising a lot of those other groups as well. So we know, for example, by focusing on Hispanic, Latino folks, a lot of Native Indigenous people in our system also identify as Hispanic, Latino. So we could be addressing a lot of those needs as well, and maybe have some custom tailored, sort of targeted outreach for folks who kind of identify as both. So thank you for raising that, Kiva. And Rachel, I see your hand again.
So I was going to say, specifically with regard to criminal legal system involved, justice involved populations, I know I had a conversation with Patrice Guillory, who's the director at the Office of Reentry and Justice, and she's trying to convene, I think, a provider circle. So that could be a good way to tap in and do a presentation and tap into some organizations and amplifiers through that. route. I don't think she's launched it yet, but I know it's like definitely a near-term goal for her office, so.
That's wonderful. Patrice is great. Okay.
And in regards to what you said, Jamie, Jeanette, in the chat, the economic equity team is trying to advocate. We're actually writing a letter to the legislature right now so that we can possibly get the age raised at least one more year. Because most counties, and I think Contra Costa County has some limited programs that serve 21 to 24, but most counties and most of the programs are 18 to 21. And so we're actively lobbying to have the legislature raise the age limit to 26 to 25 to 26.
That's fantastic, Eva. You're right. Most of our programs that target TAGE within each three are 18 to 24. We have one provider in the community that serves young people under 18. It's a lot more red tape when you're doing that, so not a very available service. And then I know that some providers, not through necessarily our funding or whatnot, can serve up to 26 because you can be on your parents' insurance until you're 26. That seems like it might be a good indicator that you're still developing or still establishing yourself. Okay. Kind of now that we've had this conversation where we brainstormed our target populations, folks that we want to be making sure we're enhancing our outreach to, does it feel okay to move on to our current information channels and amplifiers? Cool. Okay, I'm going to share my screen.
Oh, good. I was going to say, you're sharing that?
Yes, I'll share my
Okay,
screen.
great.
And this was included in the packet, and I know it was very, very small. So I will share a slightly enlarged version here. And what I've done is hidden a couple columns just for readability. They're still there and they're still in the packet, but I wanted to make sure that we could just kind of read it a little bit better together. So I know that there was a goal of folks to be able to add to this and generate their own ideas. And I know that that might have gotten lost in the shuffle of the holidays and certainly in this last week for us in the storm preparation that we've been trying to wrangle around. So it totally a-okay if this is your first time taking a gander, taking a look, and we can add to it as we're going through it. But it's actually quite a long list. And what we've done, or rather what Jamie J has done, has taken a stab at really trying to identify who are people that are offering services. So things like takeaway items or on-site services with the lens of who can we, give flyers to so they can stick it in their hygiene bag or something. What are channels that people have? So are there face-to-face contact with people who are experiencing homelessness? Maybe they can pass out a flyer. Do they have a mailing list? Maybe they can signal boost our flyer. And I'm using flyer just to mean kind of all the tools that we're developing. Do they have meetings with service providers or the public? Maybe we can do a presentation there. And then what are their specific population focus? And again, a lot of this kind of overlaps with what we just talked about. So we can add to that and build out more. And that's going to be, again, a way for us to assess, are we kind of spreading to all the populations that we want to be tapping into? Are we focusing on a couple at first? Are we prioritizing? Not that there's a right way or a wrong way to start off this work, especially since it's just the initial effort. I just want to make sure that we have the knowledge and we know what we're doing. So happy to kind of do a quick scroll through and people can look at it. Happy to kind of give an overall verbal of kind of what's included in here. What feels like the best way to navigate this? Never fun going cell by cell on a spreadsheet, I know.
Just a quick clarification. At the bottom there, the page, it says food distribution.
Yeah, it's just because this was initially based on something I made related to food distribution where it had like every single food distribution site.
Okay, so
yeah.
this is a full list. This isn't just a list of food distribution.
My
Okay, got
bad.
it. It's just, no, it's all good. I was like, wait a minute. Okay, great. There it is. All right. That was the only thing I saw.
Real-time editing. Thank you.
Yeah, that was good.
again, we hate reinventing the wheel. If we've got a decent template for something, we'll use it.
And if
Okay.
there are some, like if you guys are thinking of some, call them out and we can go, this is alphabetical, so we can make sure they're already in there. And if they're not, then we can add them. So like, do we have the Contra Costa Solano Food Bank? I think so.
Yep, we've got a lot of churches on here. So those congregations that will maybe hold a weekend pantry or an evening meal or something, we made sure to put those on there. We've got a lot of food related resources like a community produce programs across the county. We've got Contra Costa departments like our libraries, our planning advisory work group, CPAW, a lot of kind of what we call adjacent services. So things that will be like childcare or employment services. Help Leads is on here. That's probably a thank you to Joe on that one.
Hey, Jamie,
mhm.
folks were asking if somebody's asking if we can download it. I can try and put it in our box folder and put a link in here and see if that will work. So hold on, I'm gonna, yes, keep talking and I'll try and make that happen in the background.
And so this is a good question. So you just mentioned Health Leads and I see it in there.
Mhm.
So that wasn't from me. And I don't know who Alexis Cook Graham is, but I'm interested because I'm just interested to see where that overlap is.
Yeah. So what we've got marked down for Health Leads, for example, is that we believe that they've got meetings with service providers or the public that we could possibly ask, we could attend. And then we'll also note on the far side over here, we have geography markers. So we're making sure that we're not, ignoring particular areas of the county. But a lot of this is not filled out, you can tell. So if you have additional information of, oh, I know that Health Leads in Contra Costa, we're doing that cohort work, we should be contacting someone else and maybe the cohort would be interested in connecting with us. That's what we can use in this spreadsheet to kind of refine our communication strategy.
And so I'm glad that we're talking about this because I wasn't able to get onto the spreadsheet, but I do have a list that I'm hoping to somehow get onto the spreadsheet. And I might be able to do it myself, but I just wasn't able to access it recently.
No problem. Feel free to share that list with us and we'll combine it into the big list. Or if you want to input it into the spreadsheet template that we shared out and then send it over, that works too. What I will say, and I realize I should have prefaced all this, is that this is not meant to be a list that is replacing like a 211 resource list, right? So while we're sharing this information and while there's contact information in here, really encourage us to view this as our planning tool, as our list for communication efforts, all that, rather than something that will turn into a resource directory, because we want to build up what we've got.
Right, because this is supposed to be our list of where we're going to be sharing our materials, not
Exactly.
necessarily like, I mean, this is where our materials are supposed to be going to.
Exactly.
And Jamie, about the link, yeah, it goes straight to what's it called, Box or something like that, and you need a login. Like,
Oh, okay. Let me try
and I
and
don't
set
know.
it. No, you shouldn't need
I
a
know that
login.
Mark did the box setup.
No,
but
no,
I don't know.
you
if
shouldn't
we have
need
to
it.
set this-
So
Yeah.
hold on. That's why I wanted to see if it was working. Hold, please.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted by chat because I was looking at you. Yep, we've got our nonprofit providers in here. We've got some of our programs like Homeless Court, but providers like Hope Solutions and Hume Center, people who are really connected with H3. We've got particular housing programs like our Idaho departments. Again, a lot of churches, Oakley Senior Center, so those community gathering hubs of where people come to spend their days. Let me see. Talked lots of churches. We've got community groups like the East Richmond Heights Municipal Advisory Council. I know a lot of you all are engaged outside of work, outside of your role in this committee, and a lot of different local or state or even national level sort of advisory boards, networks, all of that. So if those feel like viable resources that you think could benefit from learning about our work, feel free to share that and we can add them in.
Could I ask a clarification question around why there's so many St. Vincent de Paul's? Like it says a name and then it says St. Vincent de Paul. Is it?
They have different locations. So what's hidden right there is the physical locations, but they have little chapters everywhere.
Well, right. But I mean, my question here would be, why not send it to the head of St. Vincent de Paul and then have them distribute to all of the little ones? Like, is that?
We can. This is again coming from that food distribution list that had all of the locations. So yeah.
Got it.
But also, yeah, if we were going to mail them, we might want to just mail them directly there because it might take extra steps or get lost in the mail if we send it to a central spot. So.
Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, so maybe you could just say a little bit more about that beyond the local scope statement in terms of how they would be relevant and how you would see them relevant. Because I am kind of someone who's involved in stuff beyond the local level that's related, but might not be useful in terms of how you're thinking about the amplifier and channel list. And I don't want to kind of throw a bunch of things on there to just be all wild and stuff. So I guess.
And they might not be, if it's not like a large contingent of folks who would benefit from this information, then it might not be as kind of free-forming there. But, you know, on the other hand, if you are part of kind of a larger network that, you know, does this work really, really well, actually, or is doing cool new things that we might want to learn from, then maybe they join our group and can share some information with us so that we can shortcut the learning process a little bit from other people who've come before us. But yeah, it may not be directly relevant. I just want to get our creative juices flowing of, hey, I know I'm part of this Contra Costa contingent in a statewide effort. Let me share with that group of, here's something Contra Costa is doing.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, there's a group called Empower Missouri that actually does like incredible work around food justice, housing justice, and I'm always so impressed by their efforts. And then I was thinking to myself, well, that's not really relevant all the way in Missouri, but since you said that, you know, what you just said, I'm thinking, okay, that gives me a little bit more of a scope. So thank you.
No problem.
Also on that discussion, I know I was just in the chat. Now I got to remember what I was going to say. Nope, it's gone. Dang it.
Sorry, I'll just note we are struggling with technology. I can't get the app. The box is not letting us share publicly. Sorry, county.
Yeah, our tools don't always lead us where we want to go. Okay, so this is the current list we're working on, always willing to make it dynamic and iterable. I think that's iterable is the word. So that if you think of something tomorrow, next week, next month, don't hesitate to share. We can, it's a living document. And what we want to do with this list is use it to form the basis of how we are deciding who we're directing our capacity towards, essentially, right? We've talked about, you know, sharing flyers, having presentations, meeting people where they are. And this is, as I said, a long list. And so we're wanting to make sure that we are, with this group of driving this discussion, knowing how we're targeting our efforts, right? How are we going about this work? And so thinking about what are our preferred channels of reaching people, posters, resource boards, you know, are all food banks on some sort of statewide or regional kind of collaborative that we could post to their shared message board? Are there social media posts that we could kind of latch on to? I know that one of our county departments, they recently went on a radio show trying to solicit kind of interest in becoming a foster parent. So I thought that was really cool, and I've been meaning to follow up with them to see how that went. So really just trying to think with this group what feels like some good activities to undertake, what feels like a good way to go about prioritizing our outreach efforts. How are we identifying our information gaps? And we can, you know, when this gets more filled in, we can pull out that data, right? We can say, hey, we've got 50 West County groups represented, but only 3 Central or 20 East. We can talk about a little bit of the distribution of what our no network looks like, so that we're able to know our gaps and know where we have to do a little bit more work to identify partners around. And then we can think about, as well as a group, what are the kinds of questions we want to be asking these groups so that we can build partnership? What are the kind of opportunities that we see to grow with them?
And Jamie, that's a perfect segue into just getting some brainstorm from this group of, as we think about doing some information gathering, both from these amplifiers and people with lived experience. Maybe it's a focus group, maybe it's, you know, one-on-one interviews, maybe it's a survey, but what are the things we want to know? So I'm actually going to share my screen because I'm working on, I have some examples of questions that we have talked about in previous, sorry, trying to make this bigger, that we've talked about in previous meetings. So if we're thinking about with amplifiers, what kinds of questions we might want to be asking them if we get their ear. So, you know, one example is like, do we want to know what kinds of materials they already are using or know about? And that may be like this laundry list, like they've seen a presentation, they know about our flyer, they go to our website, they, whatever that is. Other ideas is like, yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying that H3, us, the ones with this new material that we're trying to, are you saying that we're going to ask them if they already know, like the amplifiers, the ones that we're sharing that material with, we're asking them what they already know?
What they already know.
What that is?
That could be one of the things that we want to know. And is it working? I think what we really want to know is what's the information you need and how do you want to get it?
Right.
So right here.
That sounds more accurate than
great.
Asking them what they already know.
Great. So thinking of like, do you know how to access homeless services in Contra Costa County? Do you know what to expect after you reach out to those access points? What's your sense of what's available to people? I don't know. These are ideas. What and then other ideas was like identifying other people that they think we should know about, and then preferred channels. So kind of what Jamie was saying, like, do you want a poster? Would you want a screensaver? Would you want a video? Would you want a flyer? How do you want to get that information? But I think the first question is, what's the information you want? What are things that you guys, I mean, some of you are amplifiers, right? What are the things that you don't have that you want to have in some way that you can share out with other people?
This is making my brain twitch. Because
you don't have to come up with all the answers right now.
Well, no, it's not even that. It's because it's a both and scenario. It's a two-way, like, and I'm going down 2 different roads right now, well, literally like splitting my thought process.
We're also going to be asking people with lived experience the same question, or like another set of questions. So we can start with one or the other. I don't care.
Oh, don't touch this one yet. Go back to the other one.
Okay. We'll start with the amplifiers.
That's like a 5th and a 6th. I don't need that one yet.
We won't go to that gear yet.
Twitch.
So do these 3 seem like good questions to ask people? Do you know how to access services? Do you know what to expect after you ask them? And this one's maybe too vague.
And is this in a sense of like a survey, like you email them? We haven't figured that part out, because that's
we don't know.
Like, that's one of the splits.
This may be more of a one-on-one interview, possibly with maybe like a set number of key amplifiers, or we can decide it maybe. So we'll get to work groups in a minute, but we can decide how we want to get this information. But I think right now we want to know what we want to know. Okay,
so that I don't have to worry about that thought process yet. Great.
Nope.
And I
I
think
do like, I'm sorry, I do like the potential amplifiers and I do like the preferred channels. I think those are very important. And I can't think of anything else to add to that list.
And I think that one point that we should also think about is how do we provide information consistently? Because it's one thing to have this meeting and get all this great information, and then, you know, it's very common. You don't necessarily sign up for the email newsletter right after that, or things get busy, so they don't reach back out, we don't reach back out, etc. So how do we, once we engage, continue the relationship and continue to build it within our capacity, within their capacity, all of that. So we're not just, you know, making an exercise of, hey, we had a meeting, check, we're done.
Jamie, I added this, like, how often do you want to get reminders or touch base? Is that kind of capture, or do we word it differently?
No, I think that's fine, and it might not end up being a question that we ask. It might be, you know, this group says we're going to reach out to people twice a year and see what kind of connection they want to make, or, you know, it could look many ways. So I don't want to prescribe what we should do necessarily, but that's something I think about, is how do we, our system changes regularly, new resources come in, old resources close out. And so once we have that kind of initial conversation, information can become stale quickly. How do we make sure we're doing as much as we can to make it easy for people to get up-to-date information?
One thing I added was, what channels do they have to get information out? We may know some, but there may be some we don't know. So I'm thinking we could ask, like, maybe there's meetings they're part of we don't know, or newsletters they have, or things like that. Oops. Whoa. Sorry. Okay. Any other thoughts about this one for amplifiers?
The tools, I noticed that colleges and school, like community, oh, this is just the tools, not necessarily like locations.
That's okay.
I was thinking like the schools, colleges, districts, college districts, but that's more like location than it is.
We have them.
material.
We have
Yeah.
those listed on our amplifiers
That's a different list.
Yep.
Yeah.
But so what your point, Joe, so one of the things they may have that we don't know about is, like, they may have some student portal, or they may have some regular, like, so for example, community colleges have food pantries, and they have whole committees around basic needs for students. So that could be something like that.
And then location wise, like, and I'm thinking like BART, right? Like that's somewhere where we would send material for them to post material, right? Like that's what that's for.
Or maybe we
So
do a
it's-
billboard.
Right. And then so I'm thinking like Amtrak should probably then be on that list, right? Or like,
Jamie, can you add Amtrak?
and
I'm
movie
so-
theaters, community centers. Those were just other things that kind of came to mind.
Great. Yeah, Rachel, go ahead.
Just one quick thing about the, how often do you want to get reminders, touch base, just per Jamie's point in the chat earlier, maybe control that a little bit. So give options that you feel like are within capacity for staff. Like if quarterly feels like something you can manage, then maybe you say quarterly, or if monthly is, you know, manageable, you mentioned monthly, but whatever, kind of determine ahead of time what you guys feel like. Because the worst thing is that would happen is if people sent you, you know, a contingent of people, or even just one person said, hey, I'd like to get this information at this particular interval, but that's just not staff capacity ready. And then they, you know, that already kind of like turn them off to the system.
Great. Are folks ready to move to the people with lived experience?
There's
Questions?
something that came that I wasn't able to get out before about
Yeah.
presentations, about like in-person presentations, or I guess
Mhm.
Zoom in presentations, whatever that looks like. To do like a presentation at a college or for library staff
Mhm.
or like those kind of presentations, I think would be really helpful.
Mhm.
And then I think that even furthering presentations with our networks, like even if, say, like somebody that I'm working with doesn't necessarily have services or does anything with the unhoused population, the material still would be helpful for them to have, right? So I'm thinking like a presentation or just sharing it in general to everybody and anybody is a good idea, regardless if they have services for the unhoused or not.
Great. So I added presentations kind of under those tools. It's a little in between a couple different spots. All right. So I want to move to the like questions that we would want to ask people with lived experience, specifically around that front end. Like this audience, I'm thinking like the people that would need to know how to access services and what happens once they access services. So one of the questions was like, who or where do they get information from? Who do they trust or not trust, and why or why not?
Are these people that are currently like in shelters or using or services, or?
Yeah, I'm thinking, you know, or people with recent lived experience that basically have used or are trying to use our system right now.
Yeah.
That like the people that we want to have all this information. So what do we think about these questions? Like, who or where do you get your information from about homelessness? How would we want it? Homelessness, homeless services.
It can even be how, who, where, and how.
What do you guys think about this question about like trust? And I'll add a caveat, like I'm hoping for these, if we do interviews, for example, or focus groups, that we would have leaders in our system that have a lived experience of homelessness, like we did for some of our other groups, that you all are the ambassadors and doing these, asking these questions, is not me, for example, or Jamie.
And with the trust factor, I mean, that's going back what I was saying earlier about having that message of trust. So what are we asking them? Like, I'm going to trust somebody with my life, and I'm going to trust somebody with, you know, providing services. That's totally two different kinds of trust. So like, are we asking them, who do you trust with the information? Who do you trust with support? Like what's the trust factor?
Yeah, that's a
what's
good
the topic
question.
of trust?
I'm actually thinking, as you're talking, I'm thinking it's really like, who do you trust for information? But this is maybe the same as this first question. I think this is kind of getting to like, who are the trusted amplifiers? Jamie, I don't know if you have any thoughts about this either, but I think we want to make sure that we're getting.
So these conversations, when we talk about people who are experiencing homelessness and you start having these conversations, it's really important because they don't trust the system. We don't trust the system, but that's a blanket statement. So I don't know, that's just a real conversation to be having with folks. And I think it's important to have, but we just have to figure out what that topic of trust is.
Definitely. And these are definitely rough draft, first kind of brainstorming on paper questions.
Definitely.
I think what this question is kind of a mirror of the amplifier question, where we're asking, who are your network connections? So we're trying to make sure that we're connecting with the right people, and it won't do anybody any good if you know, someone tells us, I don't trust Joe over at this nonprofit. And then we're in our kind of own brains going, oh, we should really be connecting with Joe.
Yes.
Joe does a lot of work. So
Right.
making sure that we're directing our energy towards things that are going to be effective.
Yep.
And sorry,
I
if
like that.
anybody's named Joe, that was just an example.
It's a Joe with an E.
I was going to
It's
say
Joe
Joe
with
with an
Not
E.
me.
Exactly, a fake Joe.
Yeah,
Joe
it's the
Schmo,
other
not
Joe
Joe
Schmo.
Bruno.
That's right. The other Joe Schmo. Yeah.
So then identifying information gaps, sort of those same questions, like, do you know how to access services? Do you know what to expect? What type, I mean, maybe even more broadly, like what type of information do you want and need? Are you getting it? I think the same question of like, how do you want to get this? I think one other question is like, do you need this? We haven't even talked about languages.
Other languages, yeah.
But this, I think this question about like messaging, because this has come up a lot around like language that we use and images we use. And I don't know how we would want to ask this, but I think this is really important. This came up around like an old version of our flyer with like, you know, an administrator was really clear, like you should use these pictures. And then when I talked to people on the ground, they were like, I hate those pictures. Like, so that
Horrible.
kind of stuff. Like something about, because and the other thing that's come up a lot is like, and this came up through all those interviews, right? For our videos, people were like, if you said homeless, I didn't think that you were talking to me. I didn't identify as homeless. So how do we word things so that people recognize that we're talking to them and we have services for them?
Well, and you know, lack of housing. I don't know. I mean, like, are you, I think, didn't we change that? Are you, what was the question that we asked on that flyer? It's on the flyer.
Something
I
like
think.
experiencing homelessness. But I think we can ask people because different people may have different things that work for them. So I think this is part of what, you know, a question that we can ask in these conversations.
And thank you. Rachel's also flagging that with languages, talking about what gaps exist in our language representation of all material. So I'm translating that in my head of, are we using an appropriate reading level? Are we using readable fonts and things like that, as well as, are we using language that has connotation that's harmful, or language that has nonviolent connotation, that sort of thing?
Yep.
And Rachel, okay, great.
And it even using more positive instead of saying like positive language, not the double negatives.
Yep.
Readability.
I think, yeah, that's exactly the words of positive language, strength-based language, something that makes people want to come to you rather than, you know, the, hey, you're homeless, you need help. We want to say, hey, what can we offer? Do you need supports? What resources could help you survive and thrive? Yep. Thank you, Amanda, highlighting kind of the importance of word of mouth and being able to trust your friends, the people that you're living near, that when there are opportunities out there to connect with CORE or other resources, if they trust you, they might end up trusting CORE too.
How about at restaurants? It just dawned on me, restaurants and local, I mean, I would even say bars. Like, can we put flyers up at restaurants and bars? I don't know. Random thought.
Well, so related to that, we could reach out to business districts and chambers of commerce.
Yep. And so going a little bit more into that whole trust factor, right? Like, there are people that I trust within the system.
Mhm.
And then, oh gosh, again, it's finding the topic of trust. Like, if we're asking anybody about who they trust, where they get their information, I'm going into this thought process of all of the misinformation that we have out there these days with our politics. And so where they get their quote unquote trusted information might not really be that trusted in the larger scheme of things. So then how do we address that? That's my thought was going there.
Yep, I think that's really an important thing to call out, and something we're never going to solve for 100%. So just identifying these amplifiers and people we're connecting with, I think is going to make a movement in that direction, because right now we know people talk, and we know that it's going to not always be the most up-to-date information, because, you know, like I said, our resources change a lot. And so how do we develop relationships and communication mechanisms that allow us to do that consistently, so that we're at least making progress? And when people are spreading that word of mouth, they can be like, actually, no, I heard from so-and-so last week that this thing's the case now, not that thing. And hopefully at least improve it, because that is a hard nut to crack, Joe.
Well, and it's when you come up to that situation and when they say it, like, well, I can easily say, well, that's not true. Like, you know, I understand that might have been your experience, but that's really not that. It's not true. Like, try again. But it's hard. That's really, really hard.
Yeah. And part of this could be, okay, well, I heard this thing and I'm not quite sure if it's true or not, but I know who to contact to get the real, or I know what website to go to, or the librarian can tell me. So it's a little bit of building the, not necessarily having that information in the back of your brain, but building the knowledge of where to go to get that most recent information.
Okay. More thoughts about this? So what I think we can actually move into right now is identifying folks that might want to work on some of these. I'm thinking we might want to build just 3 short-term working groups of people who want to like meet in between this meeting and our next meeting in a month to dig deep on some of this stuff. So for this one, there's people
Yes,
with
please.
Yep.
Put me all in for all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, this is my stitch. This is me.
Great. And so we would probably meet once or twice between now and the next meeting, just so people know what to expect. And we would be working on either for the people with lived experience feedback, it would be sort of honing in on like, is it a focus group? Is it a survey? Are they interviews? Who should those people be? What those questions should be, like really tightening that up. Same thing with the amplifier thing. And then a group of people that want to really dive deep on developing the actual materials once we get some of that feedback about what people want. Any other people interested in any of these?
You got
3
some
groups?
chats. Yeah.
Okay.
I think
Amanda
said lived
okay,
experience.
great.
And then Juno's, I'm gonna volunteer Juno for all of them too. No, I'm just kidding. She said she's having audio problems.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so Amanda's in for lived experience. Juno, if you're interested in any of these, you can just put it in the chat. Okay, anybody else? Otherwise, it's going to be me and Joe.
I would think that Kiva would be interested in
I'll check in
lived
with Kiva.
experience. Yeah, I think she would definitely be interested in joining.
Hi, Teresa, go ahead.
I'm not volunteering
Yes,
to
no worries.
to be on any of these. But something I really want to bring to the attention is that there are a lot of people, especially immigrants, that don't read. So when you're thinking about your materials
Yep.
and how they're approached and they're embarrassed always
Yep.
to let you know that they don't read. So it's very difficult to get to them. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I dealt with this one time where the family was to receive benefits from Section 8, and they threw the paperwork away until someone approached them and said, "Did you get that paperwork?" And they said, "Well, yeah." "Well, what did you do with it?" "Oh, we just threw it away." "Well, don't do that because we want to give you Section 8 housing voucher."
Right.
And so they had to walk them through that. I don't know how you deal with that, but I think it's important, especially when you're dealing with people with other languages.
Yep.
You forget, "Oh, let me give you this paper in Spanish." Well, I'll
Yep.
take it, but maybe they can't read it.
Yep. I think that's really important. Let me make sure I have this. Yep. Okay. Anybody else that, oh, let's see, there's chat. All right. Any other? So our next steps, so we will start to pull these working groups together. We will have our next meeting on the 14th. If so send I'm going to say send contrast, so I'm going to send these minutes out to all you guys, but if have any other amplifiers, and what I can do actually is send you all the filled in Excel sheet so that you can see what we already have and see if that cues your brain for anybody else you want to add for amplifiers or channels. Other questions? Here, I'm going to stop sharing. Questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas?
One thing I want to plant the seed around is thinking about how we're going to be measuring our success and looking at how we're going to be prioritizing our work. I'm already thinking about things like, okay, I know last year we did 29 presentations in the community, not, you know, part of our regular council meetings or provider meetings or sort of the regular groups that we're already connected with, but just sometimes one-on-one with a community member or one-on-one with an organization. And so maybe that's a benchmark for us. Do we want to do 35 this year? Do we want to do 40? Like, how do we want to grow that? Considering the work that we're focused on with this group, or do we want to make sure that we are targeting, you know, more people in East County than we were in past years? How do we want to, so yeah, just start thinking about those things. And as we're developing this work, how do we go about doing that in a way that's informed by the data and the way that we want to have the biggest impact we can?
I love that a lot. I'm gonna say that my one concern right now is what I was saying before around, you know, having the material provided, but then one, of course, you know, there's resources and lack of housing available, but then, you know, putting even more work on the volunteers of 211 and CORE. And so I'm wondering if we can keep that discussion in our thread, the relationship, like making sure that 211 CORE knows that we are pushing more material and that they might get more phone calls or, you know, that kind of thing. That's really my only concern. But yeah.
So Jamie, what that's cueing for me is maybe something that you or whoever is our point of contact with 211, like we should be measuring calls to 211. And if we launch this stuff, we want to see that the calls are going up to them.
We get calls, reports with their monthly invoices. So that might be that we can, another data point that we kind of integrate into this.
Oh yeah, great. Because I'm saying, like, if we push it out there and then all of a sudden we say, oh yeah, look, we just got 100 more calls than we did this time last year or this time, like that would be significant. I think that would be good data to follow. And I think also too, like measurables, like how many, like, say, for example, we're H3 will put it upon ourselves to print out the paperwork and send that stuff, packets to people, you know, printable stuff, like how many people are receiving them? Are we getting feedback from them? Is it helping? Like that, there's also that data point too, like how many more people is getting the material and who is getting it from that point of contact.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I like that framing, Joe, because I want to make sure we're measuring things that we've got control over. When I think about, okay, 211 might have gotten 100 more calls in this month, our work is a part of that, but they could have also heard from, you know, the council about the Measure X funding, and people might have been calling in around that, or there might have been a storm happening, and so more people were calling. So trying to really integrate all those puzzle pieces, that's the fun part about data, right?
So it sounds like the next meeting, part of what we might want to do is tighten up our measurements as we get a little closer. Next meeting, set measurements.
And I'm going to do research myself just because of my graphic design background, but I'm wondering if maybe on your systematic level, you can look into the different styles of material, right? Visual, audio, there's like all of those, like, how do people learn? Some people learn by visual, some people learn by audio. And I'm wondering if we can pinpoint what kind of material to create out of those list of learning styles.
Yep, and I can check with our communications team to see if they have information, but I think also this feedback that we're gathering, we're gonna do from amplifiers, and people with lived experience will also tell us for themselves what really works for them. So yeah, definitely.
This is lovely.
And Rachel, welcome back. So at one point we were discussing work groups. I know you said you were interested in the materials development work group. We had two other work groups. One was digging a little bit more into the amplifier feedback gathering, and another one for the people with lived experience feedback gathering. Are you interested in any of those?
That's a tough one. And since I didn't see, I mean, where do you have gaps? I guess, where could I be helpful?
Yeah, let me, we have two people on the people with lived experience one in the amplifier, and one in the material development.
Well, I would be happy to hop on the latter two, the two work groups that only have one person.
Great.
If that would be helpful.
Yeah, totally. Perfect.
Thanks.
Awesome. And I'll also put a call out to people that have said they're interested in this work, but didn't make it to the meeting. We'll see if anybody else is interested in that. I think our work here might be done. Does anybody else have anything?
Weren't we talking about in our other meeting about utilizing the time? We've got 20 more minutes, 10 more minutes, 12 minutes. I don't know. I'm just saying.
Before we go, though, I think Jamie Klinger would really appreciate a call out.
God, yes.
Our time count is happening on January 25th, and I think many of you are signed up to volunteer on this call. But if you are not, we still have room to volunteer and help us do one of the most important exercises we do as a community to demonstrate funding need and all that fun stuff. So Jamie just dropped a link in the chat on how to sign up for that. We are looking for people the day of the count to do early morning canvassing. We're looking for people to help us with donations, to supply food to our very kind volunteers. There's a training that you'll have to attend if you're doing that on the ground canvassing. And I believe there's 1 or 2 in-person trainings left and 1 virtual training. So there's still time. Please, if you're inclined, definitely don't hesitate to sign up.
Is there a deadline to sign up?
Jamie J looks like she's got that on the tip of her tongue.
I mean, as soon as possible, because the trainings, the 2 in-person trainings are happening at the end of this week, and the very last training is next Wednesday, and somebody has to be part of a training before they can't volunteer unless they're part of a training. Because there's a lot of detail about how to do it. Does that help you, Joe? Thanks. And the link is in there. You can, once you click on the link. Oh, and thank you for sharing that, Rachel, about the Richmond Community Mental Health Forum.
Great. Rachel, is there a link where folks should sign up for or could get more information after they leave this meeting?
Yes, I had it, and then now I'm gonna look for it again, and I'll put it in there. Give me a second.
No problem.
I also wanted to just do a quick plug for those of you connected with people who are still experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So we have added extra capacity to a bunch of our shelters. That capacity is still there. So people should, if they are interested in shelter, call 211 to connect with CORE. There's a few, I'm going to try and send out, I don't know if it's going to happen by the end of today, an email hopefully that talks about how to connect to other shelters, but when in doubt, call CORE and they can let you know if there's shelter available. Jamie, anything you want to say about that?
Oh, go ahead, Jamie. I'm sorry. There is something that you raised that is a concern of mine. Go ahead.
I was just going to also add, if you are near a care center, you can also walk into a care center. The Trinity runs a care center in Walnut Creek, and they've got lots of space at their Armory Winter Evening program, and they have lowered barriers during this emergency storm situation. So it's not as difficult to get through there. And GRIP has extra room for families and single adults in Richmond. So if there are folks who are looking to get out of the wet weather this evening, you can walk into GRIP and make that known.
There is a concern from some folks that I've been talking to, and I'm glad we had this quick little conversation, even though it's not about equity work, but just something for H3 to be aware of. People are going missing, like a lot, like the community that goes out to the unhoused population to feed them, to give them supplies, to make sure that they're safe and doing whatever. They're missing. They don't know how to contact. They don't know where they went. They're not in their normal sleeping patterns. And so it's most likely because they've gone to shelter or they've like somehow, and I'm wondering if there's a way to follow up to find, I mean, like, I've been getting a lot of people calling me and saying, hey, do you know what happened to so-and-so who always used to be at this location? And I'm like, I'm sure that they're in a shelter somewhere, but how do you really find out for sure? Like I don't know. That's just something that's come up. People have gone missing.
That's a good question. And I would say that that's probably not something that we can.
Yeah, I don't think it's
come
anything
up
that
with a
we can do.
solution with.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's nothing, like I was saying, there's nothing really there, but it's just something there's a conversation.
Yeah.
There is concern about some people, they are saying that they're missing, but
Yeah.
I'd hope that they're in shelter.
If that concern escalates further, I definitely recommend, doing the legal steps of filing that missing persons report. And if it gets to that point ever, that's kind of that emergency response level right there.
Oh yeah, see, that's not something I even thought about. Dang it. Oh God, that hurts. Yeah, but okay.
But you're right. Many people have found their own accommodations. They're staying with friends on a couch for the evening. They're, walking into a care center. So not everybody is where we would normally expect them to be if it were bright and sunny in September, right? And speaking of, I'm actually going to drop off right now because I'm going to try and get in touch with one of our care centers real quick.
Yes, and I'm going to drop off too. We have an emergency situation meeting that we're doing internally twice a day. Thank you all. I really appreciate your time and commitment. I will follow up with an email. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. And I think that's it.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
This was great.
Great.